Welcome to the Book Club. I'm Peter Martin. I'm delighted to say I'm joined today by author Alec Gordon. He's got a book out. It's Billy McNEILL in Praise of Caesar, and it is basically all about one of the greatest ever captains Scottish football has produced, certainly the greatest ever captain for Celtic, an iconic figure. Many people know the story of Billy McNEILL as a player. What was the inspiration for you for this book, Alec?
Well, clearly I had known Billy for a long time, many years, and I thought there was a book in Billy that had never been written. He had done a couple of autobiographies, but there was a book there that I still felt that folk, because he's such a lovely guy and so well loved, there was a book there that we needed to pull together while there was still time. I have to say, I've got to remember with the age, a lot of journalists out there who knew Billy McNEILL very well, sadly, are no longer with us. So with that in mind, I had the kernel of an idea, Peter. I got a call from a publisher who asked me if I was thinking of writing another Celtic book. I think I've done something like 7 Celtic books in the last 5 years. And he phoned me and I put the idea to him and he loved it. He immediately, he went for it. So basically, within about a week, everything was put in place. The one thing I had to do was get the blessing from the McNEILL family. Otherwise, I wouldn't have written the book. I spoke to Liz, and Liz liked the idea, but she was maybe a wee bit fearful of how the book would be put together. There are actually only 2 mentions in almost 100,000 words of Billy's illness in there. And one of them is the epilogue from Liz herself. Other than that, the title, In Praise of Caesar, tells you all you need to know about the book.
Yeah, I'll tell you why I like it. As you said, so many people might have read his autobiography. So many people know about his achievements. The great thing from the angle that you've gone at it is the people, not just that you would expect Celtic players who want to talk about it, who've played with him, and some that he's managed, but there's an Eddie Gray in there, there's a Steve Archibald, there's Sandro Mazzola. Sandro Mazzola, for the benefit of anyone who's not of a certain age, for me was one of those iconic players for Inter Milan. And he recalls Billy, and he recalls, just basically Inter Milan and Helenio Herrera not giving Celtic any hope. He describes Celtic as mediocre.
Yeah. Well, Helenio Herrera watched Celtic against Rangers at Ibrox a couple of weeks before the European Cup final. It was a 2-2 draw. I was there that day. The rain had non-stop for about 48 hours. It was virtually impossible to play football on Ibrox that day, on the pitch. I thought Celtic played quite well, and Jimmy Johnson scored 2 goals, as I recall. But Herrera in the stand, not impressed by what he saw. He saw a team in Portugal on a different surface play different football.
The other great thing about, not only at the front of the book, you've got that photograph of him going, he's going through a car park in Lisbon with the European Cup, no less. Strange things like that wouldn't happen, in the 21st century. But over and above that, if the European Cup was an iconic, trophy, Billy McNEILL was forever etched in the history of the club as the iconic figure that lifted the European Cup. But he was much more than that. Ken Dalglish said, this is a guy who actually for the first 7 years won nothing at Celtic.
That's correct. Yeah, I watched Celtic, as I say in the book, very early in life, and I could see teams like Third Lanark, Queen of the South, so on, no disrespect to either of them and other teams, coming to Celtic and turning them over. I remember a game at Celtic Park. Celtic were 4-0 up at half-time in Third Lanark, and drew 4 each, and were hanging on at the end. Celtic always seemed to produce a hero, but there was one hero and 10 guys who really could have been playing for any other team. We had, before my time, I never saw Charlie Tully, I didn't see Willie Fernie, but they had these iconic players But they couldn't win anything because unfortunately, the other eight, the supporting cast, if you like, just weren't up to it. So Billy, I saw the cup finals where they lost to Dunfermline. I saw the cup final, they lost to Rangers 3-0 in a replay. It could have been 103-0 that night. And some players played for Celtic that evening, and I've watched footage of it since. You thought, how on earth did they ever get to Celtic Park? And Billy threw all of it. And I think in the book, people get confused. They think that Manchester United fancied Billy. It was never Manchester United, it was Spurs. The Spurs were the team that there was a journalist in Scotland at the time who was a good pal of Billy's, a fella called Jim Rodger, and he was very friendly with the Spurs manager at the time, Bill Nicholson. And the Spurs centre-half at the time, Maurice Norman, who was an England international, was beginning to get into the mid-30s, and it was time to replace him. And only Billy's affection, like total affection for Celtic, kept him at Celtic. He could have left for a whole lot more money.
Yeah, it's amazing. That's what you call that sliding doors moment, and how your career makes that change. What do you get the feeling, and you've spoken to so many, players and managers, fellow coaches as well, who came into contact with him. Is there an underlying theme or vein that links every one of their stories that make up Billy McNEILL?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head that it would have been easy just to talk to his teammates and extend the stories of people who had actually played alongside Billy. I think to get a proper picture, I needed to talk to the guys like Alex Ferguson, who had played against him. I needed to talk to the young guys like Alec McLeish, who was given his debut as an 18-year-old at Aberdeen by Billy, and just get as many diverse thoughts, all leading, if you like, to the same goal, that Billy McNEILL was one hell of a good guy.
Yeah, and the other thing about it, I mean, you mentioned there about Alex McLeish, Alex Ferguson. Steve Archibald highlights the fact that, while he was so indebted to him for the work he did at Clyde and then the move to Aberdeen, he had this aura about him. He had this stature. He was, always upright, always as if he was walking out for the European Cup final.
Absolutely. Steve's not an easy guy to impress. I can tell you that. I've known him since his Clyde days. And whenever I was put it to him that I'm going to write this book, Steve was up for it. And he actually spoke as I've never heard him speak about another individual. And it wasn't prompted. This was really coming from the heart, and how he portrayed Billy McNEILL. And genuinely, it took me slightly by surprise that Steve had held this guy. He never mentioned it to me before until I said the book, and he said, "Right, I want in. Don't put that book anywhere to any publisher until I'm in that book." So I said, "It's no problem, you'll be in the book." And I thought Steve's chapter, if I'm allowed to say it, I thought was an excellent chapter.
Yeah, it was just a great read on that individual, and we've had him on the show. And again, as you say, he's a hard man to please. The one thing I would say, though, is sometimes in life, someone can come into contact with you that realises your potential, unlocks everything, changes your fortunes. Is it fair to say if Roy Keane was the ambassador and the captain and the leader for Sir Alex at Manchester United, was Jock Stein of a similar character to Billy McNEILL? Jock Stein changed so many players' fortunes, and McNEILL seemed to have that. He played for him, but he also had characteristics when he went into management.
For sure. I think if Jock Stein hadn't gone back to Celtic in 1965, Billy McNEILL would have left. Eventually, he would have left. Now, remember, he had pals playing down there. He was obviously very friendly with Pat Crerand at Manchester United. And because he obviously was involved in the Scotland international team, he knew what they were earning down there. And if it was purely just for financial gain, Billy McNEILL would have left before Jock Stein arrived, as we've already said. But Jock and Billy had an understanding, really, that was a lot of people, again, it's in the book, he would never give Billy a telling off in the dressing room. It didn't matter what Billy had done during the game or done wrong, 10 own goals, he would never have picked up on them. However, he would say at the end of it, I'll see you in my office in 15 minutes, and then he would get it. But there was something between these guys, and that led to the good times, really.
Strange to think, 23 medals, European Cup, 9 in a row. But if anything, the only point of regret is in 1975 he thought he should have gone on for another couple of years rather than saying goodbye to everyone in that cup final win over Airdrie.
Yeah, Billy did admit that to me. He said that you always ask the question, any regrets? And I actually went back to 1975 to find out what he said then. And back in 1975, he was convinced it was the right thing to do. He was 35 years old. He had had a great career. And also Jock thought it was time for him to go as well. I don't think he had to talk Billy into it, but I think Jock was saying to Billy, you know, maybe that your best days and leave as a hero. So winning the Scottish Cup in 1975 was 10 years after Billy had scored the winning goal against Dunfermline in the 3-2 Scottish Cup final. So he probably thought that that was the right time. But over the years, he looked back, he would have been fit enough as a centre half to probably last at least another 2 years, 3 years even.
2 quick points before we finish. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on, you know, players. Jock Stein was always of the opinion there's no point in asking someone to do something they're not capable of doing. Billy McNEILL totally and utterly seemed to understand what he was good at. He knew his remit, you know, and if you've got players around you who can do certain things, you know what you're good at, you do that, and then you let the other players do their part. Yeah,
you're absolutely spot on. Well, that was Jock's maxim, wasn't it? Play to your strengths and disguise your weaknesses. Billy wasn't Franz Beckenbauer with the ball at his feet. He knew that. I mean, there's a line in the book, I think it's this book, it might not be, Bertie Auld in the European Cup final said at one point he looked up and he was over on the right-hand side and Billy went charging past him. And Bertie said, he was the last guy I was going to pass the ball to. There's big Billy racing into the Inter Milan penalty area. Bertie knew that if he gave it to him, it would end up in the side net or somewhere in Lisbon. But Billy's forte was his ability in the air. I mean, that comes through. Everybody in the book was just saying, and I know, again, as a Celtic fan and watching them, I could see there were players that were good in the air that a lot of teams played to back then. You know, that was their forte. Billy mastered them. I can't recall a game, and time lends enchantment, Peter, but I don't recall a game where anybody ragdolled Billy McNEIll, gave him a hard time in the air. He was masterful, he really was.
I mean, he's also played in a golden era for Scottish football. You've interviewed Eddie Gray. I mean, you've gone right across all those iconic games as well. 136,505 inside Hampden Park. Yeah. And even Eddie Gray, who openly admitted he was a Celtic fan, he'd watched them in cup finals. They couldn't get past that team.
No, Eddie, when I spoke to him, genuinely, you got the feeling that Eddie had a feeling that maybe he should have gone to Celtic. Don Revie at Leeds made him a fabulous offer. Looked after the family. You know, he would turn up. They stayed in Castlemilk, not far from where I was brought up, and they would do all the right things. They would turn up with chocolates and flowers and a bottle of whiskey for the dad. They did everything right, and that was definitely one that got away. You get the feeling that Eddie Gray, of course, good professional, would have been heartbroken to lose a European Cup semi-final, but might have been one of the first in the Celtic dressing room that night at Hampden to wish them all the best in the final.
Yeah, it would be remiss of me not to mention also, this book deals with, you know, the part where Billy and the player and the accolades, but there's also Billy the manager. I thought he had a great eye for good players as well. He could spot them, he could sign them.
No, absolutely. Again, spot on. There was a wee bit of collusion between him and Tommy Gemmell. It must be said that Tommy at Dundee had been told by his chairman that they were about to close the doors. It's a familiar story. They needed money, and the only way they could get the money in pronto was to sell their best asset, which Big Tommy knew was Gordon Strachan. And so he got in touch with Billy, and Billy liked Gordon Strachan, but there was a game, Gordon Strachan's last game, which I think is in there, was against Queen of the South, playing for Dundee in a League Cup tie, and they lost 7-0. As it happens, Queen of the South were managed that night by Mike Jackson, who just happens to be Billy McNeill's best pal. And Billy, they played Rangers in the League Cup that night at Pittodrie. And Billy phoned Mike and said, how did Gordon Strachan play? And Mike said he was the only Dundee player still trying when it was 7-0. He said, do you think they're taking a punt on him? And he said, yeah. Got in touch with Tommy. They got together, made the deal, and Gordon Strachan. When I asked Gordon Strachan would he be willing to take part in this book, Gordon Strachan got in touch with me within seconds of me sending him a text message. He was on a train somewhere. He said, I can't do it just now. Phone me tomorrow. Gave me a time. I phoned him, no problem. And again, that's how Billy McNeill was portrayed by people. They adored him.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody, I mean, it's just one of those books. It's the perfect. It's a great present for Christmas. A great birthday present for anybody who wants to get an insight into a different slant on Billy McNeill, an opinion from people who mixed with him down through the years. I think they'll be pleased that they've been included, because you mentioned the desire for everyone to be able to put a paragraph in there, a page, you name it. The last question is to you. What's your feelings? Was the success in your mind of this book the McNeills and how they would look at it? Because surely that's the ultimate for you. You have to do something that, the family will look at and say, that's my dad.
Absolutely. Again, you've got it spot on. At the back of my mind, with everything that I was writing, it was for the McNeill family, in particular Liz. The saddest aspect, of course, is that I've written a book for a guy who is close to my heart as well. He'll never know that book's been written, and that can be tearful. But to your first question, I would go back to and just say I thought this book needed to be written. I've been privileged, and I really mean it, Peter, to have actually been able to put that together, and I know that Liz liked it, and she loved the back page picture, in fact, on the cover. I told her, I said, there's a picture of Billy, which I've never seen before. And I don't even know where it came from, but it just suddenly, the publishers were sending some photographs for me to select, and that one popped up. So it had to go on the back page. I think it's a beautiful, natural picture of Billy McNeill.
Yeah, absolutely. It's undoubtedly after Celtic have won a game, or he's recalling a story from the Lisbon lines. What makes a great player? He's the one who brings out the best in others. When I am saying that, I'm talking about Billy McNeill, and that was Jock Stein's quote on the back. Inside the book, no surprise to me that the McNeill family are happy with what you've produced. If you get a chance, Billy McNeill, In Praise of Caesar, written by Alec Gordon, and the contributions are absolutely top drawer, befitting of one of the greatest ever captains. If you're a Celtic fan, it's a must. If you're a neutral and a football fan, it's well worth getting an insight into this great man. Alec, thanks very much for joining us on the programme. It's been a delight chatting to you. Well done on Billy McNeill, In Praise of Caesar.
Thank you, Peter.